We're in the first Mishnah of Sefer Yetzira. We learned the Mishnah. We did the introduction to the parish. It's called the Parish Aravid. And now we're going to learn the commentary on the first Mishnah. And so he starts, 32 paths of the wondrous wisdom, the paths that are a wonder and will remain a wonder, because that's as far as we can take the wisdom, is to the essence of these paths. Beyond these paths resides a spirit that cannot be defined and is unknowable and cannot be spoken about, and yet it's the essence of that being that is in all and gives life to all and fills everything that is and surrounds everything that is. And so it says, you need to know everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in His world, He created within man something that corresponds to that creation. Man is a small world. What does that mean? It means everything within the world is within man. Everything within man is within the world. They correlate to each other perfectly. And therefore, if we know how to direct man, we will know how to direct the world. The world is already being directed by us, but we are directing the world chaotically. We don't understand the order of things. We don't understand how we are directing and where we are directing and what we are trying to accomplish through our direction. And yet, we are directing nevertheless. It's like if a person was placed in a control room and there are many buttons and he's pushing those buttons and things are happening. He's running the entire army from within that control room, and yet he doesn't know what he's running. He doesn't know where to look and how to see the effects of what he's doing. And so he's doing things are happening, and yet he doesn't understand the consequences of his actions. This is what's happening to humanity now. This is why the world is in such chaos. It's because humanity is running the world, but they don't know how to run it. They don't understand which forces they are inviting, which forces they are directing, what they are directing those forces to do. And then there are consequences. And so it says everything within the world exists within man. Shenema nasa odam, let's make a man. What's let's make a man? Let's make a man means all the forces that created the world, everything that was created before man, together, nasa odam, we're going to create man together. Betzalmenu kidmisenu is going to have the power that's within all the forces, and is going to have the form in order to be able to relate to those forces and understand how he's directing those forces. Why did we do this? Why did the Creator create man in such a form? So that from the revealed side of man, which is the body, and the functions that we can observe, that the body can do, from there we're going to know everything that's going on behind the scenes. So from the revealed part, we're going to know the hidden part. From the revealed world, we're going to learn the hidden world. And the hidden world is the wisdom that created the world. The wisdom is the real reality. The world is the dress. And from the world, we're going to learn the wisdom. The same way, from the body, we're going to know that there's a soul. Everywhere you see a human body, you know that there's a human soul. Everywhere you see a physical force, you know that there's a spiritual power that caused this force to manifest in this form. And so everything external, everything in the physical world, everything that's observable is teaching us something about the unobservable. Everything that is defined is teaching us something about the undefinable. Everything that we can see is teaching us something about the invisible. And this is why it was created in this form. This is why it was created in this way. This is why man has everything that the world has, so that he can know everything. Shenemar, v'achar oiri nakfu zois, im ipsoi erzer laha. Perish, heivorim asher nizdru achar oiri v'nechkeku zois From behind my skin, who is living there? Who is beating my heart? That's the Shekhinah itself. That's the divine force that took on form. That's what lives. That's living behind my skin, and therefore, from my flesh, I will know the divine. Because the divine took on this form. Now the life force looks like this. What does it mean that the life force looks like this? It means that the life force went through layers upon layers of dressing up, of taking on spiritual form, conceptual form, emotional form, in order to take on this physical form. The physical form is a dress for all the layers, for all the bodies that are spiritual in nature, that are all activated through this physical body. They all reside within this physical body. ולכן מבשור יחזר להה, כבר באנו לאל שהיוד הוא גוילם בלא יצירה והוא החוכמה. And so the letter Yud represents Chachma. The letter Yud in the name represents the sphere of Chachma, and the letter Yud in general represents Chachma. Why is this? Because everything that comes forth, every force, is a dress for Chachma, is a dress for the wisdom. The wisdom became the forces. When we say there are 32 wondrous paths, who are they? They're a dress for the Chachma. They're called Lamed Beis, Nesivos, Kliyos HaChachma. These are the paths that the wisdom has taken on as a dress. And therefore the Yud, which is the letter that becomes all letters, represents the wisdom that becomes all forces. So every letter, if we're going to write it, it's going to start with a Yud. The Yud represents a point, a nekuda, a dot. Every letter is going to somehow use the dot in order to manifest into its shape. And so the dot, before it takes on the form of the letter, that represents the wisdom, which is the force that's going to take on all the forms. So it says, Golem, the word Golem, spelled Gimel Lamed Mem, which is 73, the Gematria Chochma is Gematria wisdom, which means this is the clay, this is the force behind all forces. Everything that you see, it's the wisdom that dressed up that way. That's why it exists in that form. V'lekach, for that reason, just like the higher wisdom is the beginning of all creation, and she's also the last, because nothing is going to go outside of the wisdom. It's the wisdom that's dressing up as that, and therefore who is it? Even after the dress, it's still the wisdom that's dressing up. That's the only thing that exists, is the wisdom. And the wisdom takes on all these forms. And the wisdom is a dress for the essence that's unknowable, dressed up with his wisdom, and through the wisdom he took on all the forms. And so the wisdom is the beginning of all of existence, and it's the end of all of existence. V'hi bakol, and it's within all of existence. V'ne'elemes mikol, and it's hidden from everything within existence. We can't define it. We can't say any creature represents the wisdom, because the wisdom is beyond. We can say in a human being, asher cholak michochmosoi li'erev, that a human being can take on the form of the wisdom in the sense that he has access to it. He has a portion within that wisdom. He can express that wisdom. He can know some of it. But it's still ne'lomo me'ene kochoi. Even Shlomo HaMelech, amarti echkemo, I thought I'm going to be able to get close to this wisdom, but it's very distant from me. And so the wisest of all men can't touch that wisdom. This wisdom is beyond anything that man can achieve, because man is in the last sphere, the spheres of Malchus. Once we learn about the spheres, we'll get to know more about them. And so the last of the 10 spheres is called Malchus, and in there, that's the Shekhinah, that's the part of the Creator that gets dressed up in creation. In there, there's also a Chachma. It has its own Koima. In the Malchus, there are 10 spheres. And so the Chachma within the Malchus, that's the human Chachma. That's where we have access to. But the original Chachma, which is the second sphere, is way higher than the Malchus. It's way beyond the Malchus. The Malchus cannot achieve the light of the Chachma that shines through it, through 8 other spheres. The Chachma gets dressed in the Bina. The Bina comes out in the 6 Midas of Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. And then the Yesod is mashpia to the Malchus, and therefore the Chachma within the Malchus is far removed from the original Chachma that created all that we can perceive. And so it's called V'neloma me'ene kachoy. It's not possible that something should exist without this wisdom. Nothing can come into existence unless this wisdom is somehow dressing it up. It's giving it its shape, it's giving it its size, it's giving it its form, it's giving it its time, it's giving it its relationship with its surroundings. Everything that it needs, all the ingredients, come through this wisdom, and therefore it is the way that it is. Kena Yud, the same thing is with the letter Yud. Hireshes Kaloisis, she's the beginning of all the letters. V'achrisan, and the end of all the letters. V'nelemes be'en, and she's hidden within all the letters. V'ef shelimotze v'adei ois moises hakodesh. You can't find any letter of the holy letters that should have existence without the Yud, without the dat that gets expanded. When the dat expands into a line, then it's a vav. When it expands into a width and a height, then it's a daled. And when it takes on a three-dimensional shape, then it's a hey. And so it's all the Yud that's giving shape to all the letters. Also the height, also the width, also the depth. Everything is just another Yud and another Yud. Just like if I'm going to make a line, it's many dots that create the line. If I'm going to make a plane, it's many dots that fill the plane. If I'm going to make a cube, it's even more dots that fill the cube. It's all made out of dots. And none of it can exist without the dots. And so the same way, the Chachma is hidden within all the letters, within all the forces. This is the force that's running all the forces, that gives order to all the forces, that gives form and instruction to all of them to become the way that they are. Where do we see this in the body of man? Which force is considered to be the Yud? Harosh, the head of man, shenemar, demus kamar odam olav milamala. So on top of the throne that's running the world, there's a man on top. And that man is being run by his head. And so the same way, the body, on top of the body, there's a head. The head is running the body. The head represents the Chachma. The heart that runs the lower body represents the Bina, represents the mother of the body. And the head represents the father of the body. And so the head, specifically the brain within the head, is the Yud. And it's in the shape of a Yud. The point that points up, the Kutzah Shel Yud that represents the Keter, that's where we put the Tefillin. The Tefillin represent the Koitz that goes up. From there we receive from above. That's on top of the crown of the head. And the Koitz HaTachta, in the bottom point of the Yud, that's pointing downwards, that's the stem of the brain, from where all the nerves come out in order to connect to the spine. And so there we have the Yud, which is the essence of creation. From that essence come forth all the forces. Everything that happens in the body somehow came through that Yud. And that's why it's moving, that's why it's becoming, that's why it's alive, and it can do whatever the spirit decides that it wants to do. And so here he continues with the similarity between the Yud and all the forces that operate through the head. And the same way, all the forces that operate in the world, everything is coming through the wisdom, and therefore the Yud represents them all. And then he says that there's a place within the brain that is hollow. And in that place, he says, there's a leicha zaka v'daka ma'od, achi memutzaz ben aver lamayim. There's a place within the brain where there's a moisture that is between air and water. This moisture I believe corresponds to what we call today the cerebral spinal fluid that comes from within the brain. And this is the most refined material that the body can create. From this material, the body creates seed in order to create children. And so this is the most spiritual from all the different moistures that the body and the organs can formulate. And they all have their spiritual powers. Like, for example, the blood is the most obvious. The blood is the liquid within which resides spirit. And this is what spreads the life force throughout the organs. And through the blood, we can tell the condition of the spirit. So if someone isn't feeling right, he will take a blood test to see what's in that blood and to see why doesn't the spirit operate properly within that blood. What is the blood missing? In which dimensions? And all these dimensions are being managed by the organs. In which dimensions is the blood not properly nourished with the ingredients that are required for the spirit to be balanced within the blood? And so he says that in this moisture, he says it's not air and it's also not water. And this represents the spirit of life, the divine spirit, that was there before creation, where it says, V'ruach Elohim merachefes al pnei hamayim. So the same way that the Ruach Elohim was merachefes al pnei hamayim before creation, the same way within creation, within the human body, there's this space where the spirit that's being nourished by the breath is hovering above the waters, hovering above this moisture that is between water and air. And from there comes forth life. And she has no form. There's no way to describe what this potential takes on, because this potential takes on all possible thoughts, all possible experiences the human can have. So whenever we're having a thought, it means that in this area, something formulated, something took on a form, and that's what's being experienced by the spirit. And so this form has no form. It's the potential for all forms. This force has no form, because within it will reside all forms, all thought forms. Anything that we can direct the spirit towards will somehow be engraved in this place, and therefore we will experience it in the way that we do. So he says, she includes all the visions, all the sights that we can see. In herself, she has no form. She is ready to take on all forms. She's like a throne. To the secret of the creature that dwells upon this throne. The creature that dwells upon this throne we have no access to, because this creature is behind our thoughts. When we see a thought, it's this creature that desired that, and therefore that desire came forth into this area where there is this space, where there is this moisture, and therefore we see what we're seeing. But behind what we're seeing, there's a creature that lives, that's creating that vision. So who can kiss it? This place that has no form, it's like a throne, to the secret of the creature, that dwells upon that throne. Because it says, from on top of the firmament that's on their head is like the sight of a clear stone that has no form. And that's the image of a throne. And on top of that throne is the image of a man. that man represents this creature, represents this animal that dwells upon that throne. And that animal is what we perceive when we perceive. It's not the animal itself, it's the animal's will that draws within our imagination, and this is what we perceive from within our blood. So this creature represents the wisdom. Like we said before, that all creatures and all forces represent the Chochmah Elyon, represents the wisdom. And so the same way in the individual, the creature that dwells upon the throne, the reason why the movement within the body is happening the way that it is, the reason we're thinking what we're thinking, is because this creature represents the wisdom. She is the force, that she is the one that dresses up in all movement. Every nervous impulse that's going to result in a movement in our nervous system is a result of that creature that's moving our nervous system. That's why it's coming out the way that it's coming out. It's like there's like electricity, there's like some type of a dress that surrounds that creature. This electric force is like the vision of fire, and this relates to the impulses of the nerves. The neural impulses are electric impulses, and these impulses are what run the connections between the synapses. And so when the will of the creature is to think or to act, the synapses will fire an electric signal, and then this will connect the nerves in order to operate, in order to create whatever movement is desired by this creature. And so this relates to the element of fire. This is why the nervous system represents fire. And this is also why speech represents fire, because speech is the language of the nervous system. And the human who has the most advanced nervous system, he's the one that has access to speech, and he's also the one who has access to the element of fire. There are no other creatures that can create fire. And so because the human has the most advanced nervous system, and he operates from the perspective of the nervous system because he has access to wisdom, therefore he has access to speech, and therefore he has access to fire. And now it says, Min harikia ha'elyon, asher mima'al l'chayim ispashtem mimenu nesivos rabos. From the firmament that's on top of this creature come forth a lot of paths. Asher behem yeshulach koach ha'hergish v'seichel l'chol eiver roiloi. From there come forth nerves that are going to drive all these messages towards the organs and towards the limbs and towards every type of movement that can happen within the body. This is how the creature has access to the body, is through the nerves. If somehow a nerve is severed, the creature loses access to that body part, to that function. And so the nerves are like the pathways through which the creature spreads its desire, its wisdom, its truth through all the organs and through all the limbs. And so the feeling and the intelligence goes through these nerves. There is no desire or feeling within the human body that is somehow outside of this pathway that starts with this creature and leads to all the organs and all the limbs. And so if we knew this highway of potential feeling and intelligence, through this we can know the entire map of the human organism. Because everything that will happen in the organism has to somehow relate to this map. When we think in the imagination, we think of things that could happen to us based on outside events, but this is not the accurate way of looking at it. The accurate way of looking at it is understanding the internal structure of what is being activated within the organism, and this is why we're having the experience that we're having. And so every experience is somehow part of this map, and this is related to what's called the Shir Koima. is to know the source by knowing the entire structure of the Tzelem Elohim, of the shape and form that we have taken on in the human body. And this shape and this form is represented in this map of the lanes, of the paths that this creature has to all the functions of the body. And so here it starts getting into the details of it. The lanes, the paths going, for example, from the creature to the right eye and from the creature to the left eye. And through this, the creature can see. And through this, the creature has the intelligence to interpret what it's seeing. All of it is happening through these paths. Whenever there is a problem in a path, then the function of that organ is going to be affected. And so this is the path. It's the path where the creature is going to send information to the organ, instructions, for example, the movement of the eyes, and it's the path through which the creature is going to receive the information from the organ, for example, vision. And so the movement of the eyes is not necessarily the same nerve as the nerve that's bringing the vision into the brain. There are different nerves depending also on which movement of the eye. The movement of the eye from left to right is not the same path as the movement of the eye up or down. Or I think there's even a specific nerve just to move the eyes to look at the nose. And so everything is directed and everything is telling us something about the nature of creation, the nature of vision, the nature of sight, the nature of the way that the Tzelem Elohim, which is in all worlds, has dressed up in order to interact with creation. And so it says, every movement that could possibly happen within a human being, every movement that a human being can do, everything that a human being can accomplish, perform, every function, in all generations, in all cultures, everything that we've ever played with since we've been dressed up in this organism comes back to this creature. Nothing can happen here other than this creature. This creature is the only thing that exists. And this creature is only expressed through the 32 paths that we're going to learn about, and the way that they are visible in the greater world, the way that they are represented in time. And when we say that they're represented in time, it means that there are different parts of the organism that have greater control in certain times. And so the more a part has control, the more it has influence on what's taking place in reality, what's taking place in the world. And so time means we're taking the one that has many parts and we're giving leadership, we're giving rulership to certain parts over other parts. This is the nature of time, and therefore time will represent all the parts, just like space will represent all the parts. And the final place, which is the place where we experience these parts, is in the soul, in the place that we feel existence, we feel life. In that place, there's all the parts. Otherwise, we wouldn't have access to anything. And so only because everything exists in space, everything exists in time, and everything exists in soul, therefore, we have access to space and time, and we have access to all the forces who operate in space and in time. And then he speaks about the mouth, and the mouth has many different nerves. For example, the tongue. The tongue is moving at a very fast speed in order for us to be able to speak and to express ideas. And here again, we come back to the concept of time. Speech represents time because we have all the forces, which are the 22 letters and the 10 vowels. But which sound am I going to make at which time? I can't make all the sounds at the same time. That's something that happens in space, but doesn't happen in time. And so speech happens over time. The existence of the forces are like in space. They always exist, all of them. but through time, I can activate different forces. And through activating different forces, I create letters, I create sounds, I create words. And in those words get dressed concept, which represent the wisdom that dresses up in everything. And so through the vibrations of sound, we're creating a dress for the wisdom, which is the same thing that happened in the greater reality. Through the representation of time, the forces that are addressed for the wisdom are operating, each one in its own time. Each one is taking rulership in its own time. Each one is in charge of all the others in its own time. And then there's the nerve that gives us access to taste. So that's also from the mouth. And then there is the jaw and the cheeks. All of these are being moved by the nerves. All of these are movements that this creature has access to through the paths. And these are still within the brain, because everything that's happening in the head is not part of the 32 paths. The 32 paths are what leaves the head to the body. So there's the creature that's the head, and it has all these different paths in order to operate the head. And then that creature has 32 paths that go down within the body through the spine, and through that it operates the body and all the different functions of the body. So it's like we have two creatures. One is dwelling in the brain, and that's the creature of the head. And one is dwelling in the heart, and that's the creature of the body. And then there is the liver, which is in some ways a separate creature, and in some ways it's just a dress for the creature that is the heart. In some ways we might say that each organ is its own creature. Each organ has its own spirit. Each organ has its own desires. And in some ways we would say that all these organs are just a dress for the heart. In some ways we can say that each organ in the head is its own creature. And in some ways we could say that the whole head is just the brain. And all the functions of the brain, all the organs of the brain, they're all just part of how the brain collects information and disseminates information, but it's all just one big brain. And so there are many ways of looking at it, all depending on the level of how much we zoom in and how much we zoom out from this creature. If we zoom out completely, we'll say that all of creation is just one creature. And if we zoom in completely, we'd say that every particle is a separate creature. And then there's so many levels that we can zoom in between, where we would see the individual as a separate creature, we would see a nation as a separate creature, we would see humanity as a separate creature, we would see the earth or the solar system or the galaxy, and like that. And they would all be true from the context of what we're talking about. And then it goes down from there. It goes to the lungs, it goes to the heart, and then under the heart, there's a separation. There's a diaphragm that separates between the upper parts of the lower creature and the lower parts of the upper creature. And there he says, this represents the paroiches that was in the Mishkan. And so the paroiches in the Mishkan, it says, Vivdila paroiches ben ha-kodesh ben kodesh ha-kedoshim. It separates between the holy and the holies of holies. Because the head, the creature that dwells within the head, as far as the human is concerned, is considered to be the heavens. And the heart and the body is considered to be the earth. And so the head, the intelligence, dwells primarily within the heart. And therefore the heart represents the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. Because when the heart is pure, the intelligence that's within the head can dwell within and can unite with it. And that's what's represented by the Kruvim. The Kruvim were Urim Zeh B'Zeh. They were like a male and a female that are united together. And that's represented with the brain and the heart when they are united, when they're working as one. And then we have prophecy coming out of the mouth. And so there's a separation, there's a distinction, which is the diaphragm, which is called the sarefet, that separates between the kodesh, which is all the holy organs, like the liver and the digestive system, that create the body in order to be able to sustain the creature. And this represents the practical sides of life, the lower aspects of earth, which is the body. And then the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, is all the body parts that relate to the spirit, the breath, the ability for intelligence to dwell within. And this is the Kodesh HaKadoshim, this is the heart. And so when there is negative emotions that violate the heart, that come from the lower organs and constrict the heart, this is called the Chorban HaBayis. This is when the Kodesh HaKadoshim becomes impure. The Holy of Holies is no longer in a condition to receive the higher signals from the heavens, which is the desire of the creature that dwells within the brain. And this is why the Beis HaMikdash is represented by the neck. Kemigdal David Savorech Banu Lesalpios. That the Beis HaMikdash, which connects the heavens and the earth, is the neck, which represents the communication between the head and the body. And within the neck, there are two parts of the communication system. One of them is the Veshit. The Veshit is the part that communicates to the Kodesh, to the holy parts, which represent the digestive system and the liver, and through there goes the food. Through there, the heaven feeds the earth. And the deeper part, the holier part, is the Kone. The Kone is the part of the neck that's within the throat that the air goes through, and this is where the spirit gets communicated. This is where we're receiving the spiritual abundance from above. And so both of these are going through the neck, going down into the body, and therefore as long as there was a Beis HaMikdash, as long as we had the home of the divine and it was connecting the heaven and the earth, even the other nations, even those who are only concerned with material good, would have a much better time on this planet. This is why it says that if the other nations knew how much benefit they have when we have the Beis HaMikdash, then they would come and build it for us immediately. If they only understood how much their lives would improve when we have a Beis HaMikdash, then they would know that rather than whatever it is that they are doing, whatever energy they're spending to try to make their life better, it would be better spent by rebuilding our holy place so that they can receive their abundance. They would receive it through the Veshit, through the part that feeds the physical side of life. But now there is a blockage, meaning that the neck is not connecting the head and the heart, and that's called the oref, the backside of the neck gets hardened. That's called amkshei oref, that the backside of the neck gets hardened, and the nerves that connect the heaven and the earth are no longer communicating, and then the physical side of life suffers, and of course the spiritual side suffers. And so the Beis HaMikdash represents this communication. The Kodesh represents the external kelim, like the Mizbeach, and the Shulchan, and the Menorah, and all the different tools that we had that represent the services that the body can do for the soul. And the head represents the heavens, the head represents the soul. And it dwells within the heart when the heart is pure. That's why it says that when someone doesn't know what is holiness, he doesn't know in which direction to find holiness. If someone has lost the direction of Mizrach, he is in the Midbar and he can't find which direction is Mizrach. He doesn't know from where shines the light, to which way to pray. It says, Yechaven liboy keneged kodesh hakedoshim. He should imagine his heart to be the Holy of Holies. Through there, he can reconnect to the light. Through there, he can find the holiness. And so it's not that the heart is the center without the head. This is what some nations today believe. This is how they worship, is that they're simply looking at the heart. This regulates the body, because then the emotions can be out of line with the bigger nature of reality. And so it's that the heart becomes a dwelling place for the soul that dwells within the brain. The heart becomes pure, and it unites with the brain, that there is love between the two sides. And then it's like the keruvim are together with each other. When Klal Yisrael would have their hearts and their brains united, the keruvim would be united. When Klal Yisrael would have am kshei orev, they would have a separation between the heart and the brain, then the keruvim would turn away from each other. And then the abundance doesn't come forth. And then the veshet, which is the physical part, which is supposed to be feeding the physical part, is now in a situation where it doesn't get its sustenance. And then the vav of the veshet becomes long, it becomes a nun, and then from veshet becomes satan. And this is when the other nations become an obstacle to us. It's because they're not getting their sustenance, so they're frustrated, and intrinsically they know that it's our fault, and they're not wrong. This is an intuitive knowledge that they have. It's not really about what we're doing on the physical plane. It's not stuff that we can explain, why they hate us the way that they hate us. This is something that's related to the spiritual nature of things that we cannot explain. And this is because we are not allowing for the flow between the worlds to flow. Therefore, the veshet, which is the physical side of life, becomes a satan. It becomes an obstacle. And then the nations are angry at us, that we're not bringing the abundance from above. They know that their frustration is because of us, even though they can't articulate what we're doing wrong. The same way as when the body is unhappy, it starts causing damage to the soul. Even though the body is not trying to do it consciously, it's just the nature of the body that when it's frustrated, it starts hurting the heart, it starts hurting the emotions, it starts hurting the thinking process, it starts causing all kinds of constriction and all kinds of confliction. And it's not because the body knows, it's because it's within its nature, it's an intuitive knowing. The same way the other nations. It's not because what they know, it's not because what they can explain, it's because this is their nature, is that when they're frustrated, they turn against us. And so the Beis HaMikdash is the place where we repair this relationship. And we receive abundance for the physical and for the spiritual. And then there's communication between the higher realms and the lower realms. And then the life flows the way that it's supposed to. It flows from the spiritual to the physical, to Klal Yisrael, and from Klal Yisrael it flows forth to all the nations. And so here he says that V'da ki mechut hashiddur nemsheches min hamoich mispashet men lamed eis alev nesivis. And this is exactly according to the wisdom that we have today, because they knew the body. They did autopsies already in Egypt, and they understood perfectly how the body looks from within. And so there are 32 pairs that run from the body, from the brain to the body, through the spine. V'kulam kfulim, and they're all doubles. Between the cholyas of the shiddur, between each part of the spine, which is separated into many little bones, so that the person can bend. And so between these bones, there are holes, there are canals through which the nerves spread in the body. And so they spread to the right and to the left. And so there are 32 pairs of nerves. And then there's one that doesn't have a pair. And together, there are 32 nerves that are pulling from the spine. This relates directly to the 32 paths that we are discussing. V'netiva Aleph, the first path that doesn't have a pair, nimshach min hanekev shu bein achilya shemechilis hatzaver. It starts from the top of the spine, v'yala ad sheyischalek sviv harosh and it goes up around the head. And then he goes through some of these. He goes through the paths as they go out. If someone wants to look in here, they can see a lot more detail over here about the nervous system and how it spreads. And then he says that these Lamed Beis Nesivos, these 32 paths, are Asher Behem Yeshulchu HaKoiches HaNafshis L'chol Evorim. These are the paths through which the soul travels to all the organs. והנה גם כן למה בייז נסיבס רצולוי מלמה בייז שיניים בפה של אדם. So the mouth has 32 teeth, and there's a difference because there's some of them that are meant to bite, to chew, and they have different functions. And so these also teach us about the nature of the paths. And this has to do with the paths inside of us that are digesting the information. Just like the paths that are going through the organs, each one is doing something else with the information. So when we're listening to information, the information is being digested by the body because the information is being sent to all the different paths. So let's say when we're speaking, the part that relates to the information and the wisdom is going to the brain. The part that's relating to emotion is going to go to the heart. The part that's relating to practical manifestation is going to go to the liver. And so on, all the different parts are going to be spread between the body and digested within the body. If there are certain paths that are not open and the information can't travel through, then there becomes a blockage. Like today, because of the nature of the world and the nature of how we disrespect some of these paths in order to worship other parts of these paths, so we might be blocked up emotionally, and then the emotional parts of the information is not being digested. There's a backup within that area, within that organ, and there's tons of emotion waiting in that nervous system in order to be processed. And in the meantime, the new information as it's coming in is not being processed emotionally. And therefore, that organism cannot make the distinction between right and wrong because it cannot digest the information coming in properly. It's missing some of the input of the Tzelem Elohim in order to be able to digest. This would be similar to a person that's missing some teeth, and therefore he can't properly chew his food. And then some of his food gets swallowed without being chewed, and then it doesn't get digested properly. And so all these paths are part of the digestive process of the organism. The creature can only digest if it has access to all its advisors who are telling it all the different forms of information that it needs, are giving it the right feedback, and then it can process and know truth from fiction, and know accurate from inaccurate, and know good from evil. And whenever any of these paths have been blocked, the organism cannot digest. And this, so the 32 teeth are against the 32 paths of the letters, like we said, the 22 letters and the 10 vowels. There are 32 parts in the fingers. So in the fingers, we have them separated. They have the bones that can bend. That means that there's different parts in the fingers, and each finger represents a different part of the digestive system, different organs. And today there are different wisdoms that know how to read, where to look for different afflictions within the body, and also to see in this body which organs are more in charge, which organs are more dominant. All this can be seen in the hands. And so on the fingers, you have the different parts that come to 32 parts. And the same he says in the toes. There are 32 stars that are always circling around. I'm not sure what that relates to. There were 30 kings for the Malchus Beis David. In Malchus HaMashiach and Malchus Hashem Yisbarach together is 32. It's not just the human being that has this, but every living creature, even the mammals, they all have these 32 paths. These are the 32 paths in an animal. Hamasis, this is part of the digestive system that melts the food. Vadakin, this is also part of the digestive system. This is the canals of the stomach. Vakone, this is the breathing pipe. Ibeis HaKoises is also part of the digestive system. Valev is the heart. Imizrike Alev, these are the arteries around the heart. Vitarbetz Avaishit, this has to do with the canal for the food. It has a receiver beneath it. Vaveshet Atzmai, this is the where when we swallow the food, it goes down that pipe. Vakeva, this is also related to digestive system, the stomach. Vakeres is another part of the stomach. Vamora is the gallbladder. Vakoved is the liver. Vatchol is the spleen. Betarfish hakoved, there's a skin that separates on top of the liver. Voreya is the lungs. Vikrum shel hamoach is the skin on top of the skin that contains the brain. Ibnei Me'ayim is also related to digestion. V'amiya achron is the colon. V'azefek is also related to digestion. V'gaga shel hazefek is the roof of that organ. V'amoyach, the brain itself. V'koved, and the liver, seems to be saying it twice. V'shuman alev, the fat around the heart. V'klois is the kidneys. V'abeitzim is the testicles. V'ama shel sheten, and the organ of reproduction. V'taber is the area where the child is connected to the mother. Ibesar E is the place where the waste goes out. V'sampan shel koved, I don't know exactly what that means, also related to the liver. Ibeis oires yesh leveshet rames l'shnei v'loinen hamavdilim ben kodesh and kodesh hakadoshim. So also by the veshet, like we said, the kona and the veshet, the kona represents the kodesh hakadoshim because that's related to spirit and perception. Through there goes the breath. And the veshet is related to food and digestion and the maintenance of the body. So also there we're going to find that there is a separation between the kodesh, between the holy, which is what contains and maintains the body, and the holy of holies, which is anything related to the organs that contain the spirit. And so this is what he counts as the 32 paths. Yeshmem atzabim, some of them are nerves. Imhem orkin, some of them are arteries, vigidin and veins. Vigidin doifkin, like veins that have a pulse to them. Vigidin she'einen doifkin, there are two types of veins. Some veins have pulse, so want to check someone's pulse. There are different places in the body where we can check the pulse. Because it's not simply the heart that pumps the air. Obviously the beat of the heart is the main vessel that's moving the blood. But also within the veins, some of the veins have a pulse together with the heart. And that's what keeps the blood moving throughout the body. Like it's known by the hand. If we want to check someone's pulse, we can check by the hand. Because over there's one of those veins that has a pulse together with the heart, and they're all pulsing together. And so some of them are veins that have pulse, and some of them veins that don't have pulse. Some of them are actual organs. Some of them are paths that are meant to push out the waste. The best of the food becomes fat. The best of the fat becomes blood. The best of the blood becomes semen. And the rest gets pushed out through the organs that have the ability to expel waste, and it leaves through the beisarei, through the backside. Hayitzfiris, the same way goes in the world of the spirit. The best of whatever comes forth of the life force is going to go to the spheres. So when there is information that comes in, parts of it are going to give life to the heart, and part of it are going to be rejected by the heart. And those parts that give life relate to the positive attributes and the parts of the information that creates desire. And then there are certain parts that get rejected, and these get expelled through bad moods and through negative emotion and through inaccurate thoughts. And these are the parts that the spirit is rejecting. These are the parts that are not being digested properly by the spirit. These paths, they came forth from a source that is hidden and undefinable, unknowable, beyond anything that we can grasp. There is not a single creature that can know his truth. There isn't any concept that can stand on this level of existence. All who have tried will tire out, because there's no way to grasp anything beyond these paths that came forth. The one that dwells in them, the one that came forth in them, the one that caused them to be, is not knowable in any way. And so therefore they're called plios, miloshen ki yipolam imcho dovar. V'targim arei is kasi, when something will be hidden from you, when something will be covered from you. This is called the wonder. It's a wonder because it's not knowable. And therefore the first path, which is called Aleph, the first letter Aleph, the opposite of that, the tziruf of that is Pele. The first letter is Pele. It's the source that's not knowable, that has to remain a wonder, because it's not perceivable. There's a lot here, there's a lot of detail, and if whoever has the time can try to learn it on their own and to see, because I'm really skipping through and just giving the highlights. And so it says, that the Keser Elyon, the highest level, is called Ayin. And it's not knowable at all. And before it gets dressed up in the wisdom, so in that place we call it Ayin, and as soon as it dresses up in the wisdom in these 32 paths, we call it Yesh. This is where it comes out, Ma'ayin the Yesh. And so it says, In bo enesh pnei odem lachker v'leidem husa chochmo, echi erka bekeser elyon. How did it look before it came out into these 32 paths? How did he decide? In which way did it come to be? There's nothing there that he could possibly know. There's no distinction, there's no description. There's nothing that we can do over there that will give us any access to it. You cannot find the nature of its existence. So this creature has 5 names. All these 5 names relate to the functions of this creature as it exists within a body. But beyond the body, we can't know. And so when this creature lives within the body, we call it Nefesh Ruach Neshama Chai Yechida. At the level of Yechida, that's the level of Ayin. That's the level where it's united with everything and it has no distinction. That's just, we can know about existence, but we can't know any definition of that existence. When we call it Chaya, we call it the creature, then we're speaking about the Chochmah, where it's dressing up in the 32 paths. When we call it Neshama, then it's dressing up already in thought, and therefore it starts to become noble, that's the Bina. When we call it Ruach, then it's dressing up already in the Midos. It's starting to interact emotionally, and therefore we can have more access to what it is. And when we call it Nefesh, that's the level of Malchus, that's the level that's revealed within all the organs. That's the level that's called the Nefesh, that we say that when we see a human being, when we see something moving within the body, we know that it's the nefesh moving within the body. The place of the highest level of the keser, of the first sphera, is called the land of life. Even the creature that is there, it's the yechida, it's united with that force. So even that creature that is united with the highest crown cannot know the crown, cannot know it in a way that's definable, cannot know anything about it. It just receives life from there, therefore it knows its existence. But it's beyond anything that can be accessed by anyone. And it says the power of the Chokhmah, the secret of it, is to give to the spirit weight. That all the forces that get sent through the nervous system have a specific weight, they have a specific pressure within the nervous system, and this is how the nervous system is going to decide what it can think and what it can feel and what it can know and what it's going to avoid and what it's going to accept. It's all based on the amount of weight that the wisdom gives to that impulse, to that pressure that's being created through that movement. So for example, when I'm speaking, the information is being digested by that creature, and then the creature is organizing the information with a specific weight. This is now going to get integrated with all the other information that's already been there that also has a weight. And through that, the spirit is going to know how to organize and categorize all this information in order to continue itself. And so if the spirit would just receive information and wouldn't be able to give it weight, then all the information would be equally important. It wouldn't know where to begin. It's always dealing with a massive amount of information that's been accumulated, and it needs to integrate new information in order of importance. And so the secret of this wisdom is to know how to give importance to spirit, that each new spirit that gets created has a specific weight, has a specific level of importance, has a specific order of how it's going to prioritize what's important to it and how it's going to organize the information to know how to behave accordingly, how to create movement based on this information. And so it says, V'zeu soida Yetzira. This is the secret of Yetzira. Yetzira means formation, and this is what we're learning about. Formation has to do with the ability to speak and the ability to direct spirit, the ability to animate spirit, the ability to give shape and form so that this creature can interact with what's being created in an accurate way. He said, what's the secret behind it? Because all the other creatures are part of man, together they created man, like we said, Nasa Adam Beloshen Rabim, that there was a partnership of all the creatures that created man together. V'adam behen, the person has all the creatures in him, and all the creatures have an influence from man. The creatures influence man, and man influences the creatures. V'lachen yispar la'adam b'ma'aseim, therefore a person gets influenced by all the creatures, and what they do matters to him, and what he does matters to them, and there's a relationship between everything that's taking place. And this is the secret of Zeh besoid hakshofim v'ashboz v'hoven zeh. It says this is the power of magic, and this is the power of creating covenants. It's because there is a relationship between man and the creatures, and therefore we can awaken within man all the different forces. The forces have an influence on how man feels and how man interacts and how man is, because the forces are within man, and man has an influence on the forces, and therefore magic is real. Because what is magic going to do? It's going to play with these forces within man. And the most basic magical force that we have access to is the power of speech. This is why Sefer Yetzira is like the basis of all magic. Because Sefer Yetzira teaches us the nature of language and how language activates within us the different forces. And by activating these forces, we're controlling the destiny of this creature, because we are directing his behavior. We're awakening within him things that are real to him. If man was separate from all the creatures, if man was distinct If man was just an intellectual being the way that the philosophers imagine, then magic wouldn't be real because we wouldn't be able to activate him through all these different forces. But because man is tied to these creatures and has a representation of them within him, and the creatures are tied to man, therefore man can create magic. He can activate forces, and he can activate forces within himself and within other people. He can tell them things that are real or not real, and therefore they will manifest differently as a result. He can make them believe things, he can make them feel things. He can direct creatures through the energies that he sends if he knows how to direct his own imagination. And so all this is based on the power of Yetzira. This is how they were able to create and manifest through the wisdom that is revealed in this Sefer. And so this completes this Mishnah. And next week we'll continue to the next Mishnah, to the second Mishnah in the first parak of Sefer Yetzira.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.